pressures on historic buildings is greater by far now than ever before.
This is our sacred land. This is where our ancestors were buried.
I just don't think that we can hold back the impending development.
By bringing national attention to an historic site, wherever it is, it inevitably helps.
We see the Trust as our 21st century Paul Revere.
For our urban communities to survive, we need these buildings to be active.
Once they're gone, they're gone. They're irreplaceable.
It's not a partisan issue. It's an American issue that we need to save the places that preserve our national heritage.
We hold the past in our hands, and we carry the flame for future generations. This is the History Channel's Emmy Award-winning Save Our History.
Hello, I'm Roger Mudd. Welcome to Save Our History. Since 1988, the National Trust for Historic Preservation has each year selected 11 sites for its list of what it calls America's Most Endangered Historic Places. Over the years, the list has brought national attention to nearly 150 historic buildings, neighborhoods, and landscapes that the Trust considers threatened in one way or another. Based in Washington, the National Trust, chartered by Congress, has 250,000 members, is privately funded, and is dedicated to preserving American landmarks. The president of the Trust is Richard Moe. So what determines getting on the list? It's got to be a variety of factors.
Indeed it is, and we have a very competitive nominating process. Anybody in the country can nominate a site to be on this list until we put together a list that we think is balanced in terms of representing different kinds of threats to different kinds of historic places in different parts of the country, because it really is an educational vehicle as much as anything.
In the past, the list has included a sailing fleet, a lighthouse, a copper mine, Civil War battlefields. Getting on the list is no guarantee of protection, but it can be a powerful tool for raising public awareness and rallying resources. So how do you measure success? Is it simply to prevent demolition, or is it to restore a site to its previous glory?
Well, it's to remove the threat, whatever that may be. If demolition's the threat, then obviously the solution is to prevent that from happening. But sometimes the threat is underfunding, if it's a public facility. Sometimes the threat can be sprawl. It can take a lot of different forms. So we try to craft a solution.
So is this list truly a list of the 11 most endangered?
That is obviously a very subjective list once you work it up, and you can't say that the threat is immediate in every instance, because, as I say, it represents different kinds of threats.
We now continue with Save Our History, America's Most Endangered, here on the History Channel. From the 1920s to the 1970s, 6 blocks of downtown Stockton, California was home to the nation's largest Filipino-American community. But from that entire neighborhood, only 3 buildings remain, and now the National Trust says they are endangered.
When there's nothing left there, what does that say about Filipino-American history and its meaning to the larger community if our history is that expendable?
Stockton, once a gold rush town, was transformed in the 1850s into the hub of one of the world's greatest farming areas, California's Central Valley. By 1946, thousands of Filipinos had migrated to California, attracted by the demand for farm and factory workers. But the immigrant Filipinos were barred from parts of Stockton by signs that read, "No dogs, no Filipinos allowed."
And if we went to a theater on Main Street, which were the American-owned movies, you would be shown to the left or the right of the theater and not the center. They loved to bowl, but they weren't allowed in. No Filipinos allowed. Now, Filipinos are allowed to live up north or beyond Main Street. At one time, we weren't allowed to go beyond Main Street.
So the Filipino community carved out a neighborhood for themselves called Little Manila, filling it with restaurants, dance halls, and businesses. It thrived until the mid-60s, when it became a prime area for urban renewal projects and freeway construction. Redevelopment projects and the Crosstown Freeway raised more than 20 city downtown blocks, including most of Little Manila.
When they put the Crosstown Freeway through Stockton, they abolished every sign that Filipinos lived here. We became an invisible people.
Only 3 modest buildings remain from the once vibrant neighborhood.
The Emerald Restaurant used to be a Filipino labor union. And then at night, it was a social hall. And then right after World War II, it started to show Filipino movies for the Filipino community, because white-owned movie theaters would not show Filipino movies from the Philippines until after midnight. And so it had many lives. The Rizal Social Club next door is also very, very significant to Filipino-American history and to Stockton's history. Filipinos, bought and built this social club so that Filipinos had a place to dance and had a place to socialize. And right after the Rizal Social Club was closed, it became a Filipino boxing gym. The Mariposa Hotel is the last remaining residential hotel in the Little Manila area. This area was dotted with these residential hotels where Filipino men rented rooms by the day, by the week. In some instances, men had lived in these hotel rooms for decades.
Bowing to community pressure, the City Council in 2000 designated Little Manila, now reduced to a 4-block area, as an historic site.
Some see prime real estate. If only these brown, poor people and decrepit buildings could be cleared out of here. What do we see as Filipino Americans at the corner of Lafayette and El Dorado Streets? We see our history. We see our community. We see our past, and through understanding and respecting and reclaiming that past, we see our future. As we dedicate this historic sacred place and unveil the banners and the markers which help mark this place for everyone to see, we remember our long, our rich, and our painful and beautiful history as Filipino Americans in Stockton.
But designation as an historic site was merely honorary. A group of local businessmen and landowners has proposed an Asian-themed office and shopping center that would demolish the buildings.
It is an area we're going to be designating as a master development area. The proposal or the concept of developing that area came from the Asian community, from people who actually live in the neighborhood. And I think the fact that it's the Asian community that wants to do this means that there is support out there.
The impact of new business coming to our community always brings with it jobs. And jobs is really the cornerstone and very much an indicator of the health of a community. We have these 3 buildings. 2 of them are obviously neglected and have been neglected for quite some time. So we have these, what you would consider blighted buildings, versus a potential new development for an entire block. There could be hundreds of jobs.
Local preservationists would like to see the building saved and perhaps rehabilitated as a national Filipino-American museum and cultural center.
We think people would come downtown, people from all over the nation would come into Stockton, because there's nothing like Little Manila anywhere else in the nation. Every other city has bulldozed its Filipino-American communities.
I hope that it can draw public at large to view us as a people that were very productive and very positive in our life and contributed much to our community and to the world.
Save Our History, America's Most Endangered, will continue here on the History Channel.